One of the problems that we sometimes had, a small problem, was where did we stay the night? And we were in Darjeeling and we were wondering this when we saw a likely-looking tea planter. So we cozied up to him and he suggested we stay the night with he and his wife in their home on the tea plantation a little way out of Darjeeling. To get there, we had to cross a bridge, and the bridge was made, it said on the notice, maximum load 10 loaded ponies. We calculated that the weight of a Land Rover was about the same as, perhaps slightly less than 10 loaded ponies. What we hadn't really worked out was that the ponies would have been going in single file, so that the weight at any one point would not have been very significant.
And I drove alone, and the bridge went down and down in the middle, and it was extremely a frightening experience.
We could see the weight of the Land Rover as it moved across the suspension. It was actually, from being a curved suspension, it became an angle, with the Land Rover making the angle as it inched slowly across. One of the problems was the driver didn't know whether to do it at speed to get across before the bridge broke, or to do it slowly, easily, gently, to give the bridge every chance.
But the biggest challenge still lay ahead. In order to complete the next leg of the journey, the expedition would have to cross into Burma.
We knew very little of Burma. I mean, we knew about it from newsreels of the Burma campaign in the war, but we had no idea what the Burma landscape was like. What was it? Was it jungle? Was it paddy fields? How were the people dressed? What did they do?
This is where the uncertainty began. We were certain of our abilities so far, and there'd been no physical or even political difficulties, but from now on anything might happen. We've no idea what the difficulties and dangers would be.
Since the end of the war, there had been several attempts to cross Burma, but none had succeeded.
The most significant reason was the difficulty of crossing from India into Burma. There were no roads before the war. However, during the war there was at least one road built, the Lido Road, sometimes known as the Stillwell Road, because General Vinegar Joe Stillwell, an American, was the boss, basically so that he could get supplies into northern Burma to fight the Japanese, and also, more significantly perhaps, to get supplies into southern China, that he could reinforce Chiang Kai-shek, the Chinese nationalists who were fighting the Japanese. This was the most expensive road ever built, probably still is. It cost millions of dollars a mile, through this very, very difficult country. But in 1945, at the end of the war, there was no economic raison d'etre for that road, and so it was totally abandoned, and by the time we got to it, you see, which was 10 years later, it had gone back to the jungle. One could just see in places the trace, and we were able to follow the trace. It was the Rubicon. If we could succeed, we'd cracked the first great problem geographically of getting to Singapore.
We, of course, chose the right time of year. It was January. It was the waters were at their lowest. So the technique, where you would walk across the river first of all to see how deep it was and to move any big boulders out of the way.
Tim often did that. I don't know why. Perhaps his trousers rolled up more readily than the rest of us.
As far as wildlife was concerned, there are snakes, of course, in Burma, and some quite deadly ones, but I don't know that they go swimming.
Before you went in, you would disconnect the fan belt, because otherwise the fan would throw water up onto the electrics.
The second step was to only send one vehicle in at a time, so that the first one went in and gurgle, gurgle. It could be pulled back by the one still on the bank and dried out and try again.
Burma had seen some of the bloodiest fighting between Allied and Japanese forces during the war. Debris from the conflict littered the country.
We came across a Japanese two-man tank, which we all played about in. It was just a shell. Everything had gone from it.
Burma had gained independence in 1948, but fighting between rival ethnic groups now made travel through the country highly dangerous.
The different tribes in Burma, of which there are 7 or 8, all decided they wanted a hand in the government. They were extremely upset, and they've been insurrection ever since. They operated the opium trade, so they would attack anything perceived to be military or police. They also like to attack civilians for their gold rings or whatever was to be had by pinching. There was every chance that we would be ambushed, and since the road was very steep and with a lot of jungle around, and the road just about wide enough for our cars, one couldn't have escaped. The threat was indeed real, because other convoys, the army lorries, which were the civilian buses, all had several bullet holes in the windscreen and had been attacked in the past.
It was straightforward until we got to the Salween River, which separates what you could call sort of the major part of Burma from an eastern salient, the Shan state. And in that area we knew that there was a certain amount of trouble, and the Burmese army had told us that there was a certain amount of trouble. How far the Burmese army were responsible for the trouble is another story. So when we got to the Salween River, we found an escort waiting for us. 2 very clapped out jeeps, which broke down rather promptly about half an hour into this escort. We repaired it for them, and then Henry, our mechanic, drove it because he'd repaired it and he felt that he'd drive it. And you have to remember that 3 or 4 of us had done our national service, so we knew a bit about weapons and weaponry.
We didn't like the way they carried their weapons, and at one stage I think Tim and/or Nigel sort of took over the weapons from them.
So we rather took over the escort and found ourselves not only escorting the escort, but also repairing their 2 jeeps.
With some relief, the expedition crossed the Thai border and arrived in Bangkok. From Bangkok, the final leg of the journey took them down the Malay Peninsula to Singapore. Since 1948, Britain had been fighting a jungle war against communist guerrillas, but the team saw little evidence of the Malayan emergency.
Going down Malaya, the roads were excellent. It was the first time I'd really been on really excellent roads, almost since Western Europe. And certainly crossing the causeway was a significant moment. And we knew it because we had it made, another hour and we'd be into downtown Singapore and finished. We'd run out of road, so to speak. We'd achieved what we set out to do so many months before. As we came across the causeway, we engaged in a little bit of stupid dueling to see which car would be first across.
I do remember one thing, however, which did rather upset me, and that is the Oxford car overtook us.
On the 6th of March 1956, the 2 vehicles arrived safely in Singapore to a grand welcoming party.
Fantastic reception with champagne and the press, the absolute lot. I think somebody said to us that we'd arrived half an hour late. To which we said that we didn't think that half an hour was too bad in 6 months, and we weren't running a bus service.
Difficult to express feelings after 7 months and 16,700 miles on the road. But the notion of champagne and things like that was, we didn't like champagne much. I think we'd rather have beer, and there was some beer. But the real thing we wanted was our letters from home and the feeling that we could send letters home saying we made it.
The film shot by the team was assembled by David Attenborough and shown in black and white on the BBC later that year.
We got a marvellous audience for the series. I've forgotten what it was in terms of millions. But it was a very successful series, and you got the image that all over England people were sitting in front of their television sets, this little small black and white flickering image, and saying, wow! You know?
The successful completion of the expedition soon took on a greater resonance. A rapidly changing world made much of the route both physically and politically impossible.
It's been done very seldom since, and in fact since about 3 years after we did it, nobody's done it. And you couldn't begin to do it today. I mean, think of the political problems of Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Baluchistan, so that means the Middle East out. The road from India into Burma, the Lido Road, that's completely gone. The only part of the journey which would be much easier is from southern Thailand into Malaya, where now I gather there's a superhighway with tourist buses going backwards and forwards.
When one finishes an achievement, you have a feeling of both of relief and elation, and a certain feeling of anticlimax, looking ahead. This will never be the same again. I will never do this again. What can I do? I've got the rest of my life ahead of me. How am I going to make it equally exciting? Do I want to go to the office from 9 to 5 and dream of the past, this great adventure, or am I going to be able to achieve something which will keep me interested for the rest of my life?